G'day, Farm Tip Fridays are back with me, Barry the Bush Pig, and my co-hosts, Tilly and Brilly, the mini horses, eh? Hello.
Hello, Tilly. Hello.
We've got a good one for you this week, actually. Local legend Ken Mason. Been in the game 30, 40 years, been doing it his whole life. He was born with a bloody shovel in his hand, and he's going to be teaching you how to make the ultimate compost, backyard compost, that anybody can make. It's going to be absolutely sensational, and it's one of the best possible ways that you can go from a rocky backyard to backyard food forest. This is one of the essential foundational tips, so that in 3 months' time, your garden is going to look just like this. Why wouldn't you get into permaculture when you got strapping specimens like this getting around the garden? These beetroots.
Today, we're going to make a biodynamic composting. So we're going to make a compost heap made with layers of carbon and nitrogen material. And then when it's finished, we're going to put some biodynamic preparations into it. One of the more important things with making a good compost and getting the good beneficial organisms in it is actually oxygen, making sure there's a nice balance of oxygen in there. So today we're just going to start by doing something like this. Tree branches, palm fronds are really good just to try and get an air layer through the middle of the compost heap. There'd be nitrogen in it, but it's not much nitrogen in it. So if you didn't, like that will break down. If you just let that sit there for 2 years, that would actually break down into compost. But by what we're doing here today, we're speeding the natural process up. So by putting a little bit of manure or even green scraps on it, that will actually break this carbon material down a lot faster. Anything that's lived basically can be turned into compost. So, but when it gets like this dry and hard, it's sort of more carbon material. Okay, so today we're going to start by putting down a carbon layer. So this one here, this shredded coconut. So we need to do that about sort of 20 centimetre layer on the bottom over this these sticks here. And then the next layer will be a nitrogen layer, which will be manure or actually green weeds or green lawn clippings or something like that. So we're going to do a carbon layer, a nitrogen layer, and then another carbon layer. And in between those layers, we're also going to put a bit of lime and a few other things that we're going to introduce into the compost heap just to bring in minerals and that might be deficient in the soil. And by putting those minerals through the compost heap this way, it's breaking them down again a lot faster and being more available to the plant. And by adding lots of different things into this compost heap, there's more chances we're going to have more minerals in that compost heap also. So things like, you know, with the lime that we're going to put in, the calcium it's up to 30 times more available just by putting it through the compost heap, and you actually use 30 times less if you just put it straight out into your garden. So, and that's just because it's been digested by the life and broken down and turned into humus or compost basically. And it's not so harsh also. Because it's done that way, it's not so, if you just throw lime out on your plant, there's a good chance you might burn it or something by putting it through the compost. The compost is just like our stomach actually. So we're taking things, and it's going into the stomach and breaking it all down, and then those nutrients become available to our bloodstream. So it's the same as this compost. We're getting this material and composting or fermenting or digesting it down into something that plants actually love, and thrive on. To make a good compost, it generally has to be at a size of maybe 2 metres long and 2 metres high is really good also, and about 1.5 metres wide. So when that's all broken down, that'll give you about a cubic metre of made up compost, which is about, you know, roughly a tonne of compost. So you need that volume for it to all start working and heating up and breaking down. So you need the heat to, or the temperature of the compost heap to get up around that 60 to 65. So it's killing all the weed seeds and all the bad pathogens and anything bad in there, and it also breaks down quicker. So you need that size to get it to that temperature basically. Any smaller it's a bit hard. Basically, if you're just starting out and doing a compost heap, it's just to keep it simple. So just maybe 2 ingredients, like use lawn clippings and cow manure, and you could just do say 20 or 30 centimetres of grass clippings, as long as it's dried, and then just put, say, 5 centimetres of cow manure on top of that, and just do your layers like that. It's a bit like when you start cooking, you don't actually go out and make the Christmas cake straight away. You learn to make scones or pancakes first. So that's the same as compost making. And probably your first compost heap isn't going to be that well, it's going to turn out that well, but you just got to keep on. The good thing about making compost is if it doesn't work out, you can just return it again, add more water or add more nitrogen to it, and then it'll start up again. You can't make a compost too big. You'll just make it the same size, but you can make it as long as you like. So if you're making it on a farm and you need to make up 100 tonnes or something, you'll just make this 100 metres long. Instead of making it 2 metres long, you'll just make it 100 metres long. We'll just keep on going as long as you want. It's not a real problem. The nitrogen isn't too, it's just a matter of losing it if you put too much in it. It's more about the water, getting the moisture content right and the carbon, I suppose, and the oxygen. So if you haven't got enough moisture in it, it actually won't break down. It'll heat up and then it will actually dry out and it'll stop working. With this water situation, you can actually put too much water in it, and that's just going to make it anaerobic. With a good compost heap or a compost heap, you're actually trying to make it aerobic. So you're trying to get oxygen-loving, beneficial herbs and spices basically in your compost heap. So we just put some cow manure on top of that first layer of shredded coconut prongs. So hopefully that'll work well. Even though it's been raining overnight and everything's sort of a little bit of moisture on it, we're going to just wet that down, put some water on it. So one of the hardest things to get right in a compost heap is getting the moisture right. So just grab a handful of it and just squeeze it, and if there's just a little bit of moisture, squeeze a few drops of moisture out of that handful of mulch, you know that you're pretty close to getting it right. You've got to keep it simple to start with. If someone's watching this video and they go, oh shit, that is really complex, that's a lot of hard work, they're not going to try and do it. So you've got to try and keep it to start with simple. And then it's, as you're going along, you can start putting a lot more different stuff into it and understanding what's happening. So again, if this was really green, this would actually be a nitrogen source, but because it's been cut a while and the greenness has gone out of it, it's actually turned into a carbon source. Depending on the material, like we'll explain later about how the temperature goes up, so in 3 or 4 days, the temperature of this compost heap will go from 30 degrees up to 60 degrees. And then you'll just keep on watching, or you can stick your hand in. When the temperature's coming down, that's when you turn it again. You reactivate it by turning it again, and it'll go back up again. The temperature will go back up to maybe 45, 50 degrees, and then it'll come down again, and then turn it again. So sometimes, if something was made out of light material like just lawn clippings and cow manure, you could turn it nearly every week or every 2 weeks if you wanted it to break. The more you turn it, basically, the faster it'll break down also. So if you're in a bit of a hurry to get your compost, you can turn it a bit more often. If you're not in a hurry, you can just leave it. Like a lot of farmers, if they're making a lot of compost, they will just turn it once or twice maybe, or even just once, just to mix all the materials together and make sure that the moisture's right, and just leave it. They're not in a hurry. Like for me, for instance, when I was making a lot of compost, I just make a big heap and turn it once or twice and just leave it there for 12 months. And that was for next year's supply, so making sure that you got 12 months, you're 12 months ahead of yourself. Actually making it available to the plant is a big thing, so breaking that silica down so the plant can take it up. This is a mixture of hydrated lime and just ag lime. You can use just either one of those, it doesn't matter. It's just that we're just trying to bulk it up a bit here today and use it all up. Just be a little bit careful of hydrated lime, try not to breathe it in. But you're just putting like a layer on top there, just like icing sugar on a cake.
Yeah, hydrated lime, any sort of lime really. Yeah, it doesn't go well with skin and water. So if you should really wear some gloves when you're putting it on, some latex gloves. If you don't, just any contact with the skin, make sure you wash it off as soon as possible. It will burn.
This compost was made by a professional though, so he's allowed to wear no gloves.
I'm an old brickies labourer from way back, and I haven't got any skin left in my hands anyway. So the next layer is a nitrogen layer, and we're going to use just like green
Zinnia.
garden zinnia waste, green garden waste as the nitrogen source this time. So this will be actually really good because there's lots of different plant material going on there.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Flowers and everything in there, so there'll be lots of different mixture of nutrients. And scrub turkeys do what they do because it's actually their nest is. I suppose in a way they're busy when they're making it, but once they've made that compost heap, they don't have to worry about sitting on the eggs because the compost heap, the heating up or the heat in the compost heap actually incubates the eggs for them.
It's natural selection. There was one OCD turkey like 10 million years ago who was just going scratch, 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 and he had like 100 children, and all the other turkeys had one.
And they died out. All the ones that didn't make the compost heap died out.
That compost smoking already. What do you reckon, Butch?
I reckon this is the best compost we've ever made.
Sid, any new policies coming out this year with the Australian Woofers Union?
No, but we did have to have a stop work this morning. Couldn't roll a cigarette in the rain. Everyone should join the Woofers Union. Millionaire philanthropists trying to save the world on the back of hard-working woofers.
The last compost heap you make is your best compost heap you've made, so you get better all the time, betterer all the time.
Making a good compost is a work of art. Just needs a little bit more microbial bacteria and very, very close to perfection.
So if you've got a problem with, say you've got a weed that's dominant in your pastures or your garden, you can just pull that out and compost it. Compost that in the heap as well. And sometimes that will replenish the nutrients that are deficient in your garden because the weeds are actually a lot better at actually finding those nutrients. So if you can put them through the compost heap again, they make those nutrients available, take them back to the garden, and you're making your soil more fertile.
So you must be some sort of expert on this, I suppose, Ken?
No comment.
That's when you know you've met a real expert. He'll say, oh, no, you've got to ask such and such. I don't know much about compost. Been doing it 30 years and he's not an expert. It's a real humble permaculturist, someone who's out here doing the work and not putting his bloody mug on YouTube every week, trying to tell everyone how much he knows. Took a lot to get Ken in front of the camera, but glorious, ancient knowledge that's being shared, Ken.
Butchie. What do you got, Butchie? This is why I love composting the most.
So just found that little fella in there. It's really important to obviously remove the plastics, and you might get some plastic if you get the free stuff that a lot of your local councils offer. And then you want to press it down a little bit. If it's a big one like this, get out some of those aerated parts. We don't want it to be too aerobic. And as we say, the best fertilizer is the footsteps of the gardener.
These are actually just what we call the biodynamic herb composting preparations. So just close that over. So we're making a ball about the size of a cricket ball or a tennis ball out of well-made compost. So that was 502, and we've got 5 of these ones like this, and then we've got a 6th one that's actually a liquid. Okay, Biodynamics was an agricultural farming system developed by a guy called Rudolf Steiner nearly 100 years ago in 1924. And basically he's got the really basic stuff is he developed some herbal prep, or what we call composting preparations, that everything you are breaking down, like any organic matter, you put these biodynamic composting preparations in it to break it down into like beautiful high humic sort of compost. So we're just putting a little bit of compost heap around that also. That's just a way of, when this activates, it's just a way of that spreading through the compost heap. So these preparations have actually got a little bit of room in the compost heap before they actually start competing against each other in the compost heap. So that's important. We just put them in a certain sequence also. One of the biggest differences in a biodynamic compost heap and a normal compost heap is these actual preparations that we're putting in that will actually stimulate different sort of life forms and energy forms in the compost heap. It looks complex to start with, but I think it's one of those things, it's a bit like riding a bike. The first time you jump on a bike and try to ride it, you fall off and you think this is impossible, but if you keep with it, you'll actually achieve your end result. And once you can make compost, that is like, I keep on telling people, 70 to 80% of becoming a good gardener or growing your fruit and vegetables is because this is just like the food for the soil. So if you can learn to make good compost, that's the perfect plant food. And a lot of your mistakes and problems in your garden will actually just disappear just from making good compost. So this is if you started doing this commercially or you were a farmer, it's good to have a good.
Okay, so there you have it, I reckon, and Ken reckons, that is about the best compost we've ever made on this farm, and probably the best one in Yeppoon right now for sure. You don't have to go this hardcore with it, but remember those dimensions that Ken mentioned. It's not gonna cook unless you get it something decent size. So keep gathering your lawn clippings, keep gathering some cow poo if you can get a source, or some source of nitrogen. Just throw some green clippings and some brown clippings even. There are so many options and there are so many things you can use without requiring any inputs and purchasing things from the outside. Your local council will probably have some mulch that's already slightly broken down. There's all sorts of things. Obviously your food scraps can go in there, but anybody can do this. And as Ken said, 70 to 80% of the results of your fruit and veggies is going to come from this baby right here. This is where it starts, and this is crucial. Step number one to getting that beautiful soil structure, so you've got that magnificent network of mycorrhizal fungi beneath the earth, like a little brain underneath your garden, trading information, trading nutrients. This is real magic. Get your kids into this. This is down Alice's rabbit hole. This is real. You don't have to make up stories anymore. Gardening is it. It's everything. Okay, well, it's time to wrap it up for another day here at High Valley Dawn. I just wanted to tell you all a little about our mission. So we want to create an education centre here on the farm. We want to create some Earthship eco cabins in the long term. I'm looking forward to the day where we have a non-profit established and we have a little donate here button down the bottom. But in the meantime, if you want to get behind us and what we're doing, please like, share, subscribe and comment. I'm just one guy with his iPhone trying to make a difference and get a little bit of knowledge out there. So please get behind us and support if you can. And the revolution lives in your own backyard. Don't forget that.